Welcome back to Microsoft Virtual Academy. This is Module 3 in a course on XAML for Windows 10. This is about controls. We'll be talking about styling and some of the resource management that developers can employ in their applications, not just for their controls, but for also the out-of-the-box controls as well. Darren, thanks for coming back.
You're welcome.
I know, glad we sorted that out.
Yep, important.
All right, so here's where we are, the third of 3, styling and resources. And we'll be talking about just the basics of styling. We'll have a quick game that we play, which will be very exciting. Definitely exciting.
Incredibly exciting.
And then we'll show how to use Blend to manage your resources, probably the most robust resource management tool at your disposal for XAML applications, for sure. All right, just the basics of styling and kind of what that is. I think we could start with the style tag. So the style tag only can be in a resource dictionary.
Yep.
Almost every control has a resource dictionary as part of it. That would be the control.resources, where you can put that into, and including all the way up to the page, including up to the application. And that allows you to have all kinds of scope, and we'll talk about the scopes here in just a few minutes. But if you look at this one, this style, the property of a style tag, the first one, is the target type, which is very important. The target type for button, some sort of type. So this is the type that it's going to make changes to and set property values on. And so that's where we get to the setter inside it. Inside the setter, we see it indicates which property it's going to be. In this case, it's going to be the background property. And the value then is red. And we talked a little bit about type converters. Am I using the right one? Yeah, type converters. Type converters will take things like red, turn it into a solid color brush with red as its color.
And we actually get very rich IntelliSense when we're actually doing this in XAML. That although those are just freely strings for properties and so on and so forth, it does look at the target type to determine what properties are available to it, and also the same with values. So in earlier versions, it was much harder. You had to remember all these property names, but now we do have very strong IntelliSense.
And we'll talk a little bit more about implicit styles versus explicit styles, but this is an example of an implicit style. And you know that because it does set up the target type to be button. That's the type that it's intended to be used on, for, with, to.
Applicable to.
Yes, and but it doesn't have a key. And so this means you can't reference it directly, you just accept it the way it is. What happens if you put this at the top of a page is every button on the page turns red. So that's an implicit style, basically saying you don't have to ask for it, we'll give it to you anyway. With a couple of conditions in there, and we'll talk about what those are.
Yes.
All right, so what does an explicit style look like? Well, it's not much different. You can see here we have target type button on both of these styles. The bottom one, however, has X:"key. Now, why do we have key instead of name? We talked about this before. Key is because it works everywhere, gives it a unique identifier. If we had added X:"name, it would also add a field in the underlying class. And you can't do that in a resource dictionary that is placed in some other location. And so you use key on purpose. In this example, it's page.resources, so you could have actually done it.
Yep.
But I think it's good practice just to go with key so you can move these things around without blowing your mind. Yeah, so to speak.
So to speak.
If I had a button here, out of curiosity, if I had a button here, Darren, and I didn't specify a specific type of style, what color would that button be? Any ideas?
Oh, I would wager that it would be red.
It would exactly be red. It's taken from red because unless I specify the style, then I don't get any kind of custom styling that comes out of an explicit style. That's right. That's exactly right. And I circled it in 2 ways. Great.
Why not?
Why not? Another thing I can do is, what if it's not a style that I want to have as a resource, but it's some other type of value? So in this case, I have a brush as a resource. So this means the color blue is the type of primary brush, is what we called it. But now I can reuse that brush over and over again because I might want to color both my buttons and my text boxes, or both and just fill in the blank, right? Whatever controls they are, I want to make sure they all have a similar look and feel so I can extract the brush itself out of the style and make it a resource as well. You can see I'm using X:"key, and then I access it then with a static resource, and it goes and finds that X:"key that matches that resource.
So one of the key things to note about that is if we were setting the background using just the regular attribute syntax, we might have typed blue into the background field on the button.
Yeah.
But when we're declaring the resource that we want to use, we're actually creating a solid color brush rather than just specifying the color. So it's important to understand that you need to be very specific when you're using those resources.
Colors, sizes like numbers, sometimes even strings thicknesses of margin. There's a lot of things that you might want to extract away, put into another location, and maybe even move to another file so that when you need to customize your application, you can customize it all in one place. So this is sort of like constants in a class that you might have someplace else, so that you don't have all of these things that cascade problems as you start making small changes.
And of course, they may not just be reused within the context of one single application. If you're building applications for a company, you may have a company brand and so on and so forth. So that resources may be shared across multiple applications as well.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll talk about here in just a moment and how you can change those themes, change those styles, change those resources, depending on what the user might have also set. Sometimes they come in and they say, look, I have trouble seeing the screen. I need everything to be high contrast, and you can support them as well. So that can give them both a great experience and still a branded experience also. Beautiful. All right, so again, a static resource is the extension that we use to reference that. And then we use static resource again then to go and get that brush. So this cascades up so that we go, the button goes to the style, and then goes to the brush, or goes directly to the brush. In this case, it's going directly to the brush. Cool. Let's style something just so we can get a feel for it. Sometimes the slides make us kind of lose out a little bit.
Let's show that interactivity.
All right, so I've got blank app pulled up here, and the only thing I've done is I have added a button that says Hello World. That's the end. We're going to start customizing this button. And we'll begin by just changing its background color. And so I like using the designer here. So I'll go in, change its background color to some shade of blue. Say like that. So I'm going to use 004DFF.
Yep, which is some kind of blue.
It's one of my favorite blues. It's quite light, actually. Look how pale it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Flower.
It's kind of a cornflower color. That's exactly right. All right, so this would be an inline style. All right, this would override any other style that's out there because it's directly placed there. I would want to move this out so we don't have, so I can reuse it in another button that let's just pretend is right below it. Right. So I'll change this second Hello World, so that it has, I'll put them in something that makes it so they don't sit on top of each other. There we go. All right, so you can see them at the top. Oh, I'm not going to be able to do that. There we go. So there they are. The top one is blue because that's what we chose. The second one is not blue, so it gets its default style from generic XAML that we discussed in the last handful of modules. All right, so now it'd be nice if we took this blue and didn't make it inline, but made it a resource that we could reuse somewhere else. That's easy enough to do. I'll go to the properties of this control, and here's the blue right here. It's really pale. Did I set opacity?
No, it's just
really pale.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Oh, it's right there. I did set opacity. That's weird.
Oh.
Huh. That's really weird. Now that looks good. Now,
Perfect. Ship it.
Finally, we've hit a color that's not there. We'll switch it to orange. Then black looks nice on it. All right. So right here is a little black square next to the color itself. Now, this is for data binding, and it implies the color of this square implies what's going on. So in this case, it's black. Well, that means that it's locally set. That means somebody has typed or selected directly inside the element. And I want to change that then. You can see the colors actually match here, which is sort of fun. I want to change that then to create a new resource. And so I'll go ahead and select that. It's saying, OK, I'm going to extract that brush that you're using right there. We'll call it brush 1. I'm going to change that to be called orange brush. And with an R. Boy,
that often works.
That would have been disastrous.
Yep.
And then what location do I want it in? I'm going to take it right to the top of this page right here and say go. And so here you can see resources was added to the page, and then the solid color brush was defined. It was given the key of orange brush, and then that's our orange right there. So what's changed down here in our button is the resource now goes to the static orange brush. Well, that's nice. That's not what I want, though. I want to make it so this applies to everything, but I'd like to go ahead and do it implicitly because I think that's sort of a fun thing to do. So I'll go ahead and take the background off. You can see it goes back to its default of gray. And I'll create an implicit style that targets.
It's one of the great things about IntelliSense.
Yeah.
It never gives you what you want.
Yes. All right.
Like autocorrect.
Oh, gosh. Especially your phone. It's so funny.
Exactly.
Like, are you mad?
Nope, just insane.
All right, so add a setter to style, and its property then is going to be the background property. So again, I don't put a key, so this will apply to every button. Now it's going to set the background of every button, and what am I going to set it to? I'm going to set it to the value of, in this case, I'll say static orange brush. All right, so there you go. Bam! Now they both get it because it's implicit and it goes to just one. Beautiful. Now, if I were going to change that and give it a key, just so you can see what happens, my style, let's call it.
Imagination. It's amazing.
And inside this button, inside this button, I'll say X, no, not X. I'll just say style is static my style. So now this one gets applied, the other doesn't because it's no longer implicit. So that's quite nice. And then I could, of course, add another one. So for example, I might add a margin and make it just like 12, like so. And so it gets it. Of course, that goes all the way around. But the only one that actually got it is orange, or the top one, because the bottom one doesn't have any of its style applied because it's explicit. Yep, just like that. All right, so that is beautiful. So now I can have a style. I can define it in my page, and then I can extract parts of it up into a kind of a scalar value that I put in resources as well. And so we had talked about templates in the past, and how it's a pretty elaborate set of templates that developers can use. There's actually two templates, a blank and a minimal. I have minimal pulled up that I want to show you how we use custom styles and how we kind of lay those out and what they mean for both reuse as well as theming, so that you can do things like what if it's light, what if it's dark, and even better, what if it's high contrast. So let me switch over to Visual Studio here. All right, so this is Windows App 7, which all it really is our minimal. And so it has several folders, including this style folder. And then inside it is Custom XAML. This Custom XAML is a resource dictionary, and it's in an external file. So it's sort of like a CSS file, you know, in web development. And long before we get down to any styles, we set up a whole bunch of other variables that are going to be consistent across our application.
And so if people have watched our earlier modules where we talk about the X namespace there, we can see those are examples of data intrinsics that are available. So we can assign some double values and set names to those.
That's right. That's right. And so here's a couple of things setting what the responsive width is going to be. And so we've decided the breakpoints are 0, 5, 21, and 1200. Great. And you could come in and change this, and every page in your application would shift as well. That's what you want as far as reusable resources. Then what's the default color going to be? It's going to be steel blue. What's the contrast color going to be? It's white. So that's really handy. It sets up for all the other styles that are about to consume this. But we don't just throw a style in here. Oh, no.
No.
We put them in a theme dictionary. Well, this is special inside a resource dictionary because it's basically saying from this scope down, we're actually going to change what theme means. And in this case, inside this theme dictionary, we say the first one is default. And we know this because this is actually a magic string. We know that default is a value that means dark. And whenever they choose dark, this is what's going to come out of it. And so
obviously default equals dark.
Yes, that's right. And so when requested theme equals dark, right? So you can do that at the app level, or you can do it on the element level. When they select dark, this is what's going to apply to them. And what's beautiful about this is actually going to be applied as a theme resource instead of a static resource, which is the closest we can come to a dynamic resource in XAML for WinRT. And then we can start setting up some styles. And so I have this style for, let's say, the hamburger menu in this case. You can see it calls out to our custom color that we defined above. And all of this is what it's going to look like when it's dark. And then we've got the opposing, the dark side and the light side.
Okay, so the key here is light, which is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, it's much more explanatory, actually. And so it's going to be ever so slightly different. And this is what it's
probably lighter.
It's going to be slightly lighter, and depending on which of the which you choose, that's right. And then we go down, and so we know we saw default, we know we saw light, and then we also have high contrast. And high contrast are all the things that this is going to look like whenever it's set for high contrast mode for the visually impaired. And so this will go in and set that as well. Your application doesn't need this. Better to say, your application isn't required to put this in. Doesn't need it? Well, probably does in order to extend your audience as far as possible and to just do the right thing. How do you change theme values? This is how you change theme values. You use merge theme. You use theme dictionary. And if you need to bring in other resources then, and I'll show you right here in App XAML, then I can pull in a dictionary by its source. See right here. So I can go and point at its name, and it will pull in that custom XAML. That's the file we just had open. Because I'm doing this inside because I'm doing this inside the app XAML, then it's going to have application scope. I could repeat this same syntax inside a page, and it would have page scope. I've never done it, but I suppose you could do it inside a control.
Yeah. Is there any time when you wouldn't want to be using that relative path for the resource dictionary?
I can't think of one.
No?
Not
Okay.
even one.
Huh.
Maybe if what you're creating, yes, of course. So inside this template, probably not. But if you were creating a class library that had styles and you wanted those all to be rolled up nicely for you, you might be lucky and it work. But if you use the fully qualified of ms-appx : / then you put the full thing, then you'll get it. Then you're more reliably going to work.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, so anyway, this is how we did it in template 10. I thought it might be interesting to see one that's pretty comprehensive and perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
Good
That's the high level of styling. So I can style a control, basically setting its properties, and then I can move those values even out into resource values that we put at different scopes, including external files. Okay, I say let's play a game.
Let's play a game.
All right.
Everyone in the room is included.
So this kid is clearly playing a game.
Yes, he is.
He is not interested.
You see
in
how
filming
thick that
standard.
table is? That's because it has to support that laptop.
That is a cutting-edge laptop running Windows 10 right there. And I didn't notice this till now, but it looks like it's projecting onto the Xbox at the end of the room.
It's
amazing. What can't Windows 10 do is
know.
really the question. All right, beautiful. All right, so here's what's going to happen. This is the game. I'm going to set up a couple of styles, and I'm going to include then button at the bottom, right? So I've got it right here. And the button at the bottom, you're going to tell me what color the button will be based on the way that I'm setting the background.
And the great thing about that is I have the slide deck right in front of me that shows the answer.
So
I'm going to win.
If you do get it wrong, it'll be humiliating. Oh, I totally should have set it up. You're starting to think, it looks like blue.
Oh, it's blue. Aha! Wrong.
All right, so this is almost the slide that we had just a few back,
Yes.
where, as you can see, I've got the key right here, and it's red or it's blue. You have to use the key if you're going to use an implicit style like that. This does not use a key. It just takes what's... No, wait. If you're going to use an explicit. This does not use a key, so it's using the implicit style. This is the implicit style, so the background certainly better be red. Well, I pushed back instead of forward.
Yeah.
Background better be red. So this is what it's going to look like. Click me.
So this is the game, is you've got to think through the order of precedence, and obviously the whole reason we're doing this is some of it isn't necessarily as intuitive as you might think.
That's right. You might find there are some things that you can stump your colleagues with.
Yes.
I like that sort of thing. All right, good. Okay, here is the next one. What happens when you use a key to create an explicit style, but you use style, my button style, the same name? So this and this, they equal each other. I wonder what color that will be. Of course, red is going to be implicit. We know that the button is red, but all of a sudden we've defined explicit as blue. We're using that same number, or that same value then, and so we know that it becomes blue, right?
Yes.
Because now it ignores the implicit and it uses the explicit. Very good. Very, very good. Okay, here's another good one. All right, so just like before, we've created an implicit without a key and an explicit with a key. That's red, that's blue, and we know that if we don't call out the style explicitly by key, then we get the implicit value. But we are also setting the exact same property. This is the property that we're setting, right? And so we're setting that locally, manually, literally, as green. So now the question is it green, is it blue, or is it red?
Logically, it makes sense that the thing that's closest to the control would be the one that wins.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It would be so frustrating.
It would be.
If you said that this button is green and you're overridden by some style that you can't find.
Yeah, because that would never happen.
That would never happen. Yeah, of course.
But if it does happen, you can use the live visual tree control to actually track down what's going on.
Can you really?
Yeah, you can see where the styles are coming from. It'll actually tell you.
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize you could do that.
Oh yeah.
That's nice.
It is pretty awesome.
I remember you could do that remember WinJS in Blend had this like stacked, like all the inheritance? Because CSS can definitely blow your mind.
Yes.
Perfect. So we said that the color was green. We're right. The color is green. The local value
It's almost like we wrote this quiz.
It's hard for us to get it wrong. That's right. I don't actually say the value until I hit go, though, because I want to make sure. Right. So the closer you get in scope, the more likely that's going to be the one. That's exactly right. Now, what about the idea of cascading styles? We haven't really talked about this yet.
No.
And this is the special part of this one. It's based on. And so using, let's see, there we are, basing this on another style. So you can see we've already set up my button style. And then you can also see here we're referencing my button style, basing the new style on the old style. So right, I've already got this one set up. I create a brand new one basing it on that and extend it so that I set the background to orange. So the original one was setting it to blue.
Yeah, the thing we should point out that's probably been a little bit obscured there by the orange border there is a key on that other one.
There we go. Yeah, right here. So they're both explicit styles.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. They're both explicit styles with different names. One's my button style, one's my other style.
You could have really pushed the boat out and gone my other button style.
My other button style.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what are we referencing down here? My other style. Now, the truth is, blue is flowing into the new style because of based on, but then the setter unwinds that and overwrites it to orange. So it had better show orange. There we go.
Hooray.
Yeah, that's very nice. Kind of a yellowy orange.
Common sense so far.
So far, so good, right?
Yes.
Only got a few more, but this is still pretty fun. All right, what color is the button with cascading implicit styles? Now, this is very exciting. You would think that these are all the same value, but they're not. Look, this is a background property. This is the foreground property. We've set the background to blue. We set the foreground to red. So now we're going to ask what color is the blue, but I want to know foreground and background color. And as you can see down here in the style of the button, we have set the explicit style to the my button style. So here's my button style. That's this one right here. And it is saying that the foreground is supposed to be red, but it's not overriding. It's not changing the value of the background is supposed to be blue above it.
So the key here is, does the button get a composition or an aggregation of both those styles? Or does it get just one or the other?
That's right. You would think, now common sense to me says, look, an explicit style is adding more to the implicit style. Yes. So when I'm looking at the button, I can see background is blue, foreground is red. When I click next, the button is going to be background blue, foreground red. This is definitely one of those questions that if you think like I do, you got wrong.
Yes.
That's right. Because the truth is, background is being set in the implicit style, foreground is being set, but background is not, and the implicit style is overriding the entire implicit style, not just the individual.
Yes. So in effect, what we're saying is the system does not compose those two styles together where you have an implicit style and an explicit style. It's always just going to look at the explicit style.
That's right. That's right. So it's transparent, basically.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Which is unfortunate because we both expected something different.
Yeah. Now, there is this idea of generic XAML, but there's some nuances there that we better just pass on. Yes. All right.
Swiftly.
Woo, am I sweating? Is this sweat? Right. All right. What color is the button on style precedence here? Now, this is really interesting. What if we have two implicit styles on the same page? So you see there's no key for either of these guys. Each one of them sets the exact same property. One is red, one is blue. Which one of those wins?
And this is not a trick question because it does compile.
It does compile properly, that's right. And this is an intuitive answer. So if you're like, well, I think, but you just tricked me on the last one, this isn't a trick question at all. And the answer is quite intuitive. You would hope that the closer you get to your control, the more likely that's the value that's going to be picked, and you're right. Yeah. So if my button is right here, obviously the closest implicit style is blue. The furthest implicit style then is red. So my button is going to definitely be blue, right? Because it's the closest.
It's kind of funny, yeah. What color is the button that we don't have on the screen?
Right. It's going to be blue. That's exactly right. I feel like a football coach all of a sudden.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, here we go. More about style precedence. This one is really great. All right, let's pretend we've got a button, and this is very similar to the one right before us. So these are both implicit styles. See, there's no key to either one of them. Certainly this logic wouldn't even matter if it was explicit because you call them by name. But this is being defined inside application. Remember, that's the highest scope that you can define inside your app. And then this one is in the page. So here's our button. It's sitting in the page. The closest scope is going to be blue. The farthest possible scope is going to be application. It totally makes sense to put styles in the scope of application so it can be used across pages.
Yep.
But as soon as you repeat that same style, down in a page, that's a closer scope. And so the answer is easily going to be blue because it's the closer scope.
And there's some good gotchas that can trip you up when building out some of these things. When we were talking about template 10 in another module, we mentioned the fact that we have this shell page that contains other pages that you navigate to. So if you put implicit styles in that shell page, they are going to cascade down into any other pages that are hosted inside a frame within the shell page.
Yeah, that's right.
And that can trip you up a little bit if you forget that that's going on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Anything can interrupt that kind of inheritance tree, and it's always going to be, the closer is always, it's what we were saying about CSS, right?
Yes.
You start getting too many, they start sitting on top. And you get based on, and as soon as you start doing that and you really get it, anyway, just keep a clear mind and you can do it right. All right, let's try the next question. What color would it be? Let's talk about local resources. Now this is very interesting. All right, so I am in the resources property of a page, and it has resources because it's a control. We know that that value is actually a resource dictionary into which you would put resources, right? That's the reason we can put this style here. We have put an implicit style that targets a button and sets its background to red. Perfect. We've done that in a lot of questions so far. But now here's our button, and boy, are we showing something cool here. A button also has a resource property, which is also a resource dictionary, into which we can also put a style. Fascinating.
Yes.
And in this case, it's also implicit, targeting a button, and setting the background to blue. So here is what's interesting about this. Where does the scope begin, right? Is the resources on the button actually from the resource down, or is the resource, are they somehow the same when it's set inside that property?
So thus far, we've been talking about everything rolling down. And you might think, because the resource is embedded within the button,
A kind of child feel.
exactly, that it would cascade down from the button to the content of that button. And that would be a logical thought to have.
Yes, yeah. I think as an early XAML developer, I would have gotten this wrong.
Yes.
I would have said the color is clearly going to be red because blue is too far down in the tree.
Yep.
And doesn't go back up.
Wouldn't go back up to
side
button.
to side. Well, we know the truth is that it's actually blue, and putting it in the resources of the button is in the same scope as the button itself. It's
Yes.
almost like setting it directly.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I've missed two so far. All right, perfect. By the way, one interesting thing that I don't have a question about because it's just kind of exciting. If you had not used a style here, I don't know, the style's fine. But if you had made it, instead of an implicit style, it was an explicit style with a key, and you wanted to apply it to the style property of the button, the syntax would be, button style equals static resource, whatever key you chose. Right? That actually wouldn't work.
That would not work.
It's the opposite of intuitive because the way that the static resource extension, markup extension,
Yep.
the way that it works, it doesn't go into the resources as a local source.
It only goes up.
With the exception of
If you use the complex syntax for
if you use the complex syntax, and right, exactly, open bracket and say static resource key, I think is what it is, or maybe resource key equals. That does work because that object is not a markup extension. That's the object that does the work, and its logic actually uses its local resource.
And it evaluates.
Right. Is it magic? Sure. If you
It
want.
may well be.
Sure. But anyway, so that's an interesting little gotchas for sure. All right. So let's talk about this idea of precedence because it's actually slightly complicated, but this will probably make the most sense. So if I have my control, that's the local. We know that that is the closest of all and will always win. But let's pretend we haven't set local. Then we set first generic.xaml. So generic.xaml, remember, is injected automatically by the platform so that you can use all the default styles and templates that are inside generic XAML. Right? That's the first step no matter what. The next then is on your application level. This is as large as it gets. At the application means every page, every control, everywhere will have it in scope. It's sort of like generic, to be honest. It's just not handled by the platform. It's handled by you, the developer. Then we have the page. So this is assuming you're using the navigation framework.
Yep.
Here we have the page. This is the container for all your controls in your UI. This is great because you put it at the page level, every control gets it as well. And then you may have sub-containers as well. Maybe you put it in a stack panel, a grid. It also has a resources property, and you can set it just like you set pages property.
Yeah, and there's advantages to using all of these scope, some of them in terms of efficiency, because your resources get passed as something is being rendered up. So something that's declared at your application, the entire resource dictionary is scanned and incorporated and instantiated at application launch.
That's right.
If you've got something scoped to the page, then it will only be an overhead once that page has been rendered up. Yeah. Same with containers and so on and so forth within it. The resources are only instantiated at that point in time. So you can save your overall application lifecycle timeline and your memory footprint and so on and so forth by scoping resources to the locations where they're applicable to.
As a matter of fact, this is exactly what the platform team did as well. And so there was a startup cost to not only parsing but also invoking all of the templates that were inside generic.xaml. And so generic.xaml was simply injected into your application in Windows 8. And there was this, there was a cost at startup that was, it wasn't like a second or anything, but it was real. How can we make that even better? So they pre-compiled it. The reality is, if you aren't going to be reusing a style, if you're not going to be reusing some sort of resource, putting it in the application level just in case actually causes a startup cost to your application that probably is not really necessary. So if you can, bring resources down as close as possible. If you can't, you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. All right, perfect. Just a reminder about generic.xaml, right? This contains all the default styles and templates for all the controls in your toolbox. This is created by the platform team, not by you. And then it gets applied before everything else, and then comes app page control, whatever is next as well. However, if you are including a control library or you've written your own control library, then it will also have an app XAML. They won't exactly be merged, but they'll be applied.
A generic XAML.
A generic XAML. What did I say?
App XAML.
Yeah. Your generic XAML, then it will also be applied. It won't be merged to be applied at the same time because they're both compiled, but they'll just be done in series instead. That makes sense?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, it does to me too. Good. All right, so now we have tooling to talk about. And so in your toolbox of options, you have Visual Studio, well, obviously the best possible IDE money can buy, especially the free version.
Yeah, that's certainly worth the price.
Yeah, don't forget, community version is totally free.
And includes everything you need to build for Windows 10.
Includes absolutely everything you need. There's no missing piece or gotcha that right at the last minute you have to go buy something. And so we have Visual Studio, and then with Visual Studio, a free companion that ships with it as well is Blend for Visual Studio, which was originally designed as the designer. It's the tooling meant for developers doing design tasks, right? Not really so much for designers. So if you're a developer or a designer that's pretty clever, you can go into Blend and find a lot of candies given to you. A lot of it around animations, definitely around visual states, but also around managing resources like what we're talking about here. So not resources like images and things, but resources like your XAML resources. And so I want to pull up Blend and kind of show off some of the cool things that you can do. Some of you might actually be surprised by what you've had all along and maybe didn't know. Perfect. Before we do, just as a reminder, because this is one of the things we're going to do, is we can move all of our resources into separate files just like a CSS file in a web project. And then we can reference those then as resource dictionaries with a source and bring those into our application as if they were written in line. So that's really, really great. And then we can also merge multiple. So this we haven't shown yet, but it's important to say that I don't just bring in one resource dictionary, but in this case I'm bringing in 2, 3, 4. There's really no limit. It's up to me. And I can make this as dynamic as I want. It's going to be either declared in XAML just like it is right here using the merge dictionaries, or I could do all this in code so that I read what the current theme is or something like that, and I inject it there as well. So a lot of neat things you can do. Anyway, so I wanted to make sure we talked about external kind of remote libraries or dictionaries, as well as the ability to merge them. Perfect. There they are. All right, so let me pull up Blend and sort of show the capabilities here. I do not have Blend running yet. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I mean,
that would have just confused everybody.
All right, let's just start with a blank project so that everything's nice. So here's blank. I won't select.
So just to be trendy, you turned the default color theme from dark to white.
Yeah, a lot of people like dark themes. I'm not one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, it's kind of the cool cat that does it, you know. I mean, whenever you go to a hackathon, it's always the guy with all the tattoos that also has, you know, the dark theme, and I just don't have a tattoo.
Okay, so moving swiftly on.
Qualify. Danny, on the other hand,
yeah,
can't even see his face.
Dark guy.
Yeah.
Nothing but tattoos. All right, so because that's super important. All right, so let's do the exact same thing we did before. Here's our button, and I'll say hello world. And
so whilst you're doing that, this version of Visual Studio, or Blend for Visual Studio, has actually been rebuilt to use the Visual Studio shell. So it actually has a lot of the same capabilities, such as rich IntelliSense for the code behind and for XAML and so on and so forth, in a manner that previous generations did not. So if you had been avoiding using Blend because it wasn't a very comfortable experience, there's no reason not to be going back into Blend.
Yeah, if you're doing some of the advanced diagnostics against your application that you would do closer to release, perhaps, then you would still want Visual Studio, right? Really advanced things like that are still part of Visual Studio, but a lot of the coding experience has been brought in, so you don't have to constantly toggle back and forth. So it's believable that, especially during 75% of the life cycle of your app, you could spend all your time in Blend, for sure. You still get all the extensions and stuff like that. No, you don't get all the extensions.
No, you don't. You don't get things like the code extensions or anything like that. No.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So if you have made yourself addicted
it's a different
to
product.
C Sharper,
ReSharper,
yeah, then you might find yourself back in Visual Studio.
Yep.
Not ReSharper's fault.
No.
That's just the way Blend is laid out.
Yeah.
But for most of developers, I don't know, that's not the right thing to say, but for many developers, they'll spend a lot of their life inside Blend now. All right, so what do we have? Well, we have Hello World. It's a button with all of its default styling. And so I'll select the button, go into Properties, and I'll change its background to be green. And what am I doing with opacity here? I'm doing something.
You're just waving around.
I don't know how I get opacity to 20% every time. It must be some sort of default I don't understand. All right, so here we are, and it's green, and it's nice, and I want to start moving those out. Remember, I right-click right here, and I can say, make this convert to a new resource. In this case, I'm going to say that I want this resource to be at the page called Brush 1, right? Just like that. That's cool. And now this is my Solution Explorer over here on the right, and much like in Template 10, right? I'm going to go and create a folder called Styles, and inside that, I'm going to create a new item. This is going to be a resource dictionary, and I'll call this my custom styles, so just custom. Right? And so there it is. And so I can put things up in here, and it'd be nice, right? And so I'm not going to be using local, so I'll take that out because I don't like looking at squiggly lines. And my application would still build, right? I'm not using custom at this point, but how I would use it is to create that source equals, and then also to copy or paste or cut and put it up in here. But I want to show kind of how Blend can do this, and if you start having a lot of styles, this is really a piece of magic. All right, so here I am. Inside, this is my solid color brush called Brush 1, and it's being applied because you can see this green down here. But here's a neat thing that I can do. I can go into my Resources tab down here in the bottom right, and as soon as I do, this is unique to Blend, and it shows the scope of everything. So you can see I'm starting at my page, and which is called Main Page XAML, and then Custom, which is Appear at this point, and then App XAML as well. So the first thing I want to do is bring it so that Custom and App XAML link to one another, because right now Custom is just sitting there out like a satellite. And so I want to right-click on App, because that's what I want to make a change to, and I want to link to a resource. And as soon as I do, all of the resource dictionaries that are in my project all show up here. I only have one, and so Custom XAML is the one, and so I'll say Go. And so as soon as I do, it's now linked to Custom XAML. You might be curious what that looks like. All we have to do is open up App XAML to see it. And you can see all the syntax. This was empty before. All the syntax has been written for me, including the merge dictionary, so I can reference it by its source. Now, I might go in here manually and make sure that this is fully qualified, but this isn't a PCL, so I don't really care about that right now. And so here we are. Nice. That's a lot of little syntax that I don't want to have to monkey with, so that's nice. Perfect.
Danny just missed his shot.
I know. It's over now, though. Great. So back to, let's see. Here's Custom. Here's your
page.
Page. All right, so that's a little interesting quirk that you have to be inside a designer for the resource tab to work. All right, so if I were to keep looking here, I would see, all right, now these are connected. That's beautiful. I would drill into this to see whatever's in there that's empty right now, so there's nothing to see. Main page has page, and if I open that up, I can see all the resources at that scope. So you can see it's right here.
So the great thing as well is you get that strong visualization of a lot of the primitives.
You're right, Darren. In fact, it gives me the ability to edit it as well right here. I have the full editor as if I was in the page looking at the properties dialog as well. So it gives me a lot of power that way. Now, the way I can manage resources in Blend is not just being able to edit them, although that is nice visually. If I had several of them side by side, I wouldn't have to run the application. But I can also change the scope of them as well, and that's really one of the biggest powers here. So I could grab this brush one, and I could move it then up to the app XAML scope. So see, not only am I linked to custom XAML in app XAML, but I also now have brush one up scope to it. So if I were to open up app XAML again, there we go. You can see here's that custom XAML being linked, but here's the scope being changed. And if I were to go back to my page, you'd see it's not up there anymore. There's no page resources at all.
Yeah,
excellent. That's really awesome to move the scope around. I'm like, oh, you know what? Actually, this whole link or the whole brush needs to be down in the page again. And even the page is not right. I want it down in the grid. So now you can see it. Now it's moved it down into the resources of the grid. Moving things around like that is not only is it nice because of efficiency, it's nice because of accuracy, right? It's going to do it the right way every time. Now, in this case, what I really want to do is I want to take brush and I want to move it into custom. So I'll drag it into custom. Of course, it's been removed from here. And if we went back to app XAML, you'll see that it's been removed from here. And now we've got it over in our remote dictionary, and it's right there. And so I'll just hit enter so you can see it. So that's allowed me to do a lot of manipulation, right, in a really neat way of moving things around. And if I change my mind, it's easy for me to move them back. So that part I like a lot. There's one other thing that I can do that's really, really cool. So I'll open up custom XAML here so I can see that here's brush one. And I'll show you right here. In fact, let me just close this for a second so you can see just the XAML. And so here's brush XAML. You can see it's got a static resource to brush one, which is still in scope because it's basically app XAML level now. And if I went into, oh, I can't close it completely, can I? Because I need that for the properties dialog. Yes. That silly little thing. And I'll go in and I'll say, now brush one is not what I want to call it. I want to call this my custom color or my custom brush. So I can say my custom brush, right? Because maybe I typed it wrong. And this is a really nice, almost like a symbolic rename inside Visual Studio. I get the same effect here, and I can go and say, okay, what do I want to do if I'm going to rename this because it's used in places? Well, here's what I can do. I can either update all those references, which is naturally the most likely thing I would do. I could break those references, right, and convert them all to local, right? And so I do rename it, and I convert them all to local, so they continue on. I can reset them all to their default values, which basically means delete them all. Or don't fix, just do it anyway. So update reference is just brilliantly awesome. So I'll say go. You can see this now points, instead of the brush one, it points to my custom brush. And if I go into custom XAML, you can see it's been renamed to my custom brush as well. If I had a complex application with lots of templates, lots of style uses.
The power of this is impressive. You know, as you mentioned, if you're building non-trivial applications, the great ability to be able to view all your resources and see the palette for your application presented out in that very visual way is incredibly powerful. Being able to reorganize and optimize resource loading based upon scope is also something that everybody should be taking seriously if you're using a lot of resources.
That's right. That's right. Cool. And this is a standard UI. I'll show you. It's just a, if I were to, let me zoom in just for a second. I think Windows Plus? I thought it was Windows Plus. Oh, it is Windows Plus.
It is. It's just
you know, I could filter it as well, because sometimes the number of resources that you have
can be overwhelming.
So I can go just to all the brushes or just to all the other things that I might have. That's exactly right. All right. Anyway, that's Blend. It comes with Visual Studio. You get it for free. You probably already have it installed. Don't even know that you've got it. Maybe you know, they didn't know it could do that. It can really be a nice
There's actually a shortcut to be able to launch something in Blend by right-clicking on a XAML resource inside Visual Studio. You'll see an option to open in Blend.
Unlike older versions of Blend, it can open your entire solution in all of its folders. So you can go back and forth between, have the same solution open in both, and it'll reload automatically for you as well.
And it participates in source code control, which was another issue with the earlier versions of Blend.
That's right. source control, it formats your code properly, gives you IntelliSense again.
Why wouldn't you use it?
All of Roslyn is in it.
Yes.
I mean, really, why not? That's exactly right. All right, so that's managing resources in Blend. We were talking about the basics of styling, and so that's just where styles come from, using resources, the difference between implicit, explicit, and handling scope, all of those things that can be kind of tricky, touchy.
Yep.
And then we played a quick game. What about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? Both of us did pretty well, I think.
Yeah, especially with having the answers in front of us. I think we did pretty well.
That's exactly right. And then we talked about using Blend, that resource for all the developers out there. And that is creating a custom control, building out a templated control, and styling a control, or styling, honestly, your entire app. I think we did it.
We did.
All right.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Live long and prosper.